We are live. We are live. Welcome, everybody. Buenos dias. I'm going to go ahead and put a pin a comment here. Welcome. Feel free to ask any questions. All right, and then we're just going to pin that here. Let's see. Yeah, we're just going to pin that. Today we've got a really special guest. Let's see. I'm going to try to go live with my personal account, which has just a few followers here, and see if we can do that. If not, it's totally fine. But welcome, everybody. We've got a really special live stream with you guys today. Steve is the name. Steve is a farmer out here in California. If you're not aware, California it's an amazing place. I mean, we've got the coast, we've got the ocean, we've got mountains, snow, and apparently we can grow agaves too. If you guys don't know, Planet Mezcal is a social platform, and it's also a website, an educational website where we educate and also showcase all things mezcal. So I see farming. I see you there, Steve. Let's see. Can you send a request? Oh, I can also invite you. I'm gonna of my personal followers here. Let's see here. All right, invites have been sent.
What's up,
Steve.
man? How's it going?
Yeah. Oh man.
I can't see
Happy. Happy.
you.
Oh, you can't see me.
Yeah, you're a black screen right now. Should I try to
Really?
rejoin?
Oh man. Okay. Let me turn it off and then.
I
Okay. How's
gotta
that?
hop in and out real quick. Sometimes that
How's
solves
that?
it.
Is that
No,
good?
still black screen. Maybe it's on
What?
my end. Yeah, let me try to hop in and out real quick.
Okay. Okay.
Let's see.
For sure. All right. Sorry about that, everybody. Let's view the request here and let's go live with Steve once more. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining in. We've got a very special guest today here, Steve. Uh, as you all know, California is an amazing place. You can grow agaves, and we're going to learn from an agave farmer and learn everything there is to know about it. We've got a ton of questions with Steve. We just sent him a request. Let's see. Take two. Let's see if this works. But yeah, there's a pinned comment. Feel free to ask any questions. Hola, ¿cómo estás? Hickory's Tiny Farm. Good afternoon, good evening, actually. It's 7 o'clock here. I still do not see Steve's. Here, I'm going to send him an invite here. See if that works. Yeah, welcome everybody. Happy Tuesday. Hope you all had an amazing past weekend. This is Planet Mezcal, where we're chatting all things mezcal. It says here we got an issue, but I'm gonna go ahead and accept. Let's see what's going on. We're live. This is uncut. Oh, here we go.
I see you now. Oh, it's
Nice.
still black screen on my end. Oh
Ah,
man.
ah. Okay.
Here, I'm gonna try
Eh,
to just hop on. I have another phone. Maybe it's just
okay.
this phone is like acting up or something. Yeah. Give me
Okay,
one
for sure.
second real quick. I'll try to use my iPhone.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and everybody watching, if you guys can see me clearly, let me know in the chat. Let me know that you guys are having no issues, because it also could be me. You never know. But let me know in the chat if you guys can hear me and see me clearly. That would be fantastic. Here we've got the real Cameron Max says, "What's a good starter succulent? I want to get into house plants." We will definitely keep that question in mind because I know nothing about succulents. Let's see. Awesome. Yeah, we've got people here that can. Here. that can see, no issues, can see and hear. Okay. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay. Let's see.
All right, now I can see you good. Yeah. I don't know
Woo!
why it was black screening. Yeah. I got two
Oh
phones, so
man.
my other phone maybe was just acting up for whatever reason, you know?
Ah, sweet. We're here. We made it. Nice. Well, we're definitely happy we got that out of the way. How are
Oh,
you, Steve?
my bad. Good. Yeah, my bad. My dogs were barking at something. I thought my emu got out for a second.
Did you say
Crazy.
emu?
Emu. Yeah, I've got a couple of emus,
Holy
and sometimes
moly. So
they're
for
like
those
they're
of you
super
guys that don't
far.
know, emus are like ostriches looking things, right? Am I wrong
Yeah,
or
they're the cousin of so they're in the same family as and we used to be more in that family, but we got a bunch of them, you know, like through extinction.
awesome. Everybody in the chat, can you guys let me know that you guys can see and hear Steve clearly? I think it sounded a little muffled there, Steve. So
Here, let
just
me.
want to make sure the Wi-Fi internet's good. Yeah, and thanks to everybody that's watching for being patient. I really, really appreciate you guys. Let's see. Uh, Steve, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you good. I turned my Bluetooth on, so maybe it'll help a bit.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you hear me better
Yeah.
now?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, it's a
Okay.
little blurry, but I think as long as we can hear you, that's the most important thing.
Okay. Yeah,
Yes.
you got a couple pet dinosaurs.
Yeah. Actually, the real Cameron also sent a question before I forget. He asked or they
Yeah.
asked, what's a starter succulent? They want to get into that houseplants.
Probably any echeveria or any type of puntia cactus, those are going to be plants you don't really have to take care of much, but they're going to look, amazing year round, you know. I just always go for fruiting cacti, in succulent gardens because they look really nice with flowers, and then they're going to give you some fruit, and they always look really nice. Yeah.
Sweet. Well, that's a perfect segue into my next question is, can you please introduce yourselves to everybody watching here at Planet Mezcal or just people that follow Steve and just want to learn more about you?
Yeah, I'm Steve Sanchez. I'm an agave, cactus, and goat farmer out in High Vista, California, which is a suburb of Lancaster, California. And I do a little bit of everything, but mostly nowadays it's farming. Still do a fair amount of gardening and landscaping, but other people, like my dad, handle that division, and I try to handle the farming stuff. So most of my days are just spent on the farm now and working on other people's farms. So yeah.
Hell yeah. Yeah, man. I resonate with that because when I was in college, I was just bouncing in and out of gigs, and I actually did a little bit of farm worker. I was a farm worker, like a
Nice.
laborer out in the field. So I
Yeah,
definitely,
you're
I
up in
know.
Sacramento, right? You were telling
Yep.
me. Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, my little brothers went to school out in schools around Sacramento, and my little brother's doing a master's at UC Davis right now. So I'm,
Hey,
I'm
nice.
familiar with that whole area a lot. Yeah, love it.
Sweet. Sweet. Well, congrats to him. Hopefully, he does well in his master's program over there at Davis.
Yeah, it's a cool school.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. Well, let's get right into it. I know we're about 10 minutes behind, but
Yeah,
uh,
no worries. Sorry it took me a minute to get on. I'm
nah,
out
no
like so
worries.
remote that sometimes I'm even surprised that it connects, to be honest with you, the first like couple of years that I farmed out here, there was like zero reception, and then they added
Woo!
like a cell tower like 2 years ago, and it like just was game changer. Now I can actually use my phone and stuff out here.
You are the
Yeah.
real remote.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. It's like maybe 5 or 6 miles of dirt roads before you even see my farm. So
That's
yeah.
awesome, man. Well, the first question here is what varieties of agaves do you grow in your farm?
So I got a lot of different varieties. I have I'm not sure on the actual like number of varieties because I've never like counted them or nothing. But I probably have, I'd say, 15 varieties that I grow in number like over you know, 1,000 plants, and then there's like maybe 50 or 60 varieties that I might have anywhere from just a half dozen of plants all the way up to like 100 plants. So my intention with some of those smaller or lesser known varieties is to me eventually grow them out to seed and then have like a unlimited amount of them essentially. So you don't, you know, off of one agave you can get, you know, sometimes 10 to 20,000 viable seeds. On some of the Americanas I've even gotten like, you know, 50,000, 60,000 seeds. And I mean, they're not all viable, but say, you know, half of them are, you know, off of just say you buy a dozen plants to just experiment with an agave that nobody's messed with. Within a couple years, you know, 5 to 6 years on most of them, you should be able to have a, you know, a quiote that'll give you enough seed to just do whatever you want with that agave. And, you know, I've already kind of done the first generation of that because the first agave that I started planting in, you know, in a big quantity here was agave Vilmoriana, the octopus agave. And that's an agave that not very many people, you know, farm, let alone have distilled. And my intention with that agave was just, okay, let's grow it out to seed. So I bought like, you know, 500 of them. And now I have, you know, after growing them to maturity and unlimited amount of seed, you know, I think I have like over a million seeds of them. So I'm still growing them in large quantities, but that's my intention with all of those smaller quantity agaves that I have, right? So because nobody, like I can't go to a nursery and be like, oh, let me buy 1,000 of this agave or 100 of this agave. They might just have 1 to 10 of them. So I'll buy that and put it into my breeding stock, you could say. So I have a large breeding stock of agave, but I probably only have 1 to 2 dozen agave species that I'm growing in mass. And the majority of those are different variations of Americana and some of the bigger type of agaves, I would say, right now. Like, you know, like I think I have 6 or 7 different type of agave Americanas, like just alone. And probably have a couple hundred of each of those, you know. So that's one of the ones that I've planted out a lot alongside Vilmoriana.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Well, we're gonna jump around, but first I want to just
Yeah,
say
feel free. Yeah.
this is Planet Mezcal, where we're just sharing education. We're learning about mezcal. I'm definitely not a master mezcal, you know, genius by any
Yeah.
means. So we're all learning
Yeah, I
together.
don't think anyone is, you know. I think the more you get into this, it's kind of like what Einstein said, you know, it's just the more you learn about a subject, the
The
less you
less,
think you know about it. Yeah, it's like, because every time I learn something new, it's like I start diving into that, and then I find out there's like this whole community behind that, like really going into that, you know, and I'm like, oh shit, like I'm barely finding out about it, but there's all these niches within, you know, the agave growing community. So
hmm
yeah, especially in mezcal, they're kind of more of what me and other farmers here in California are doing. Like I'm born in Jalisco, so you know, the main agave out there is agave tequiliana. That's like pretty much all they have. A lot of people, small scale, might have salmianas and
I mean, yep.
doctorums because they make raicilla and pulque and different stuff. But the majority, yeah, over probably 95% is tequiliana, right? So you have to go into other states to see that variety in agave. Um, and it's overall like it's really rare to go even to Oaxaca and see a farm with like 20 different species. Like it's, you know, they're probably out there. I just don't know about them, but they're very few in number. You know, I would say, yeah. In California, most people are trying to, like, we don't know what's going to do well here yet. We've tried a couple different people, like, you know, I started growing in 2017, and a couple people in NorCal started growing in 2016. So I grew like 5 or 6 species out to maturity, and then they mostly in NorCal were focusing on Tequiliana, right? So we have a very small number of agaves that have reached maturity in California that people can like be like, oh, that's gonna do well, you know. So we're still experimenting as a whole here, like the farmers. So most of the farms, if they're smart, they have dozens of species here, and they're gonna try to kind of see what works for them. And I think that's good to do at first because like what I'm talking about with this Ville Moriana agave, that's an agave nobody was messing with, and I started messing with it, and I really I think it's going to be one of the most farmed agaves in the future for a couple reasons. And you know, now people know at least like, hey, I can farm this like in this many years, and it'll do well if you farm it in this style, right? Um, so it adds like that agave to like the Pokedex, you could say, of distillers
The
and stuff
Pokédex.
that they didn't have before. You know, yeah, it's because they can only work with what they have. Yeah.
You brought Pokemon to agaves. What in the world?
Yeah, man.
Hell yeah.
That's how I feel sometimes, because it's like I've come into agave from a lot of different angles, and you know, the angle of collecting and the angle of farming are two completely different angles.
Mm.
And when I first got into agave, like big time, you know, it was in the gardening trade, because I started building these gardens for people, and they would arm these collections sometimes of 100 or 150 different agaves on a hillside. Like to them, it was like collecting Pokemon. And then, you know, I never in my head like thought like, oh, I could make spirits out of all of these different agaves, or make products out of all these different agaves. In my head, because I was from Jalisco, I'm always like, oh, Tequiliana is the only thing that's applicable to agave spirits, because I didn't know anybody from Oaxaca or anything like that. And then when I started talking to more people that farmed agave around the world, not only in Mexico, but you know, places like Venezuela and Ecuador and Guatemala, I was like, oh man, like they're farming all these different other species in a monoculture form, but then I was like, oh, they're getting use out of every single agave, no matter where it was. So in India, they might have been farming Americana, in Venezuela, Cucuy, you know, in Guatemala, they might have been doing varieties of Americana, and each with a new, unique product, right? So then in my head, coming back related to California, I was like, well, I could try to do a lot of these different agave species and try to do different things that each of those places were doing with my own twist and styles, you know. So
Right.
because obviously there's regional denominations on the majority of this stuff, you know. So like people always say, oh, mezcal and tequila, but now there's starting to be regional denominations, for instance, for like the Cucuy in Venezuela, like they're trying to like make that a national spirit and like, you know, bring it to the US and stuff. And you know, you start to see like, you know, you really have to differentiate yourself, because these regional denominations are going to put you into a box if you're trying to like mimic them, you know. Yeah.
So you touched upon that farmers in Oaxaca, they rarely grow like anything over 20 different species. And you also mentioned that California farmers in NorCal and SoCal are also experimenting on different types. So, how would you compare the
Stuff,
growing
yeah.
conditions for those two regions?
um I think it's really, really different. You know, I mean, there's a lot of places in NorCal that are like, you know, volcanic hillsides, and like it has a lot of like forest. So like it does compare to Oaxaca and Jalisco. You could say in like how the ecosystem is laid out, you know, because Oaxaca and Jalisco are both states that are heavily forested. Like over half the state of Jalisco and Oaxaca is forest.
Mm.
So, you know, NorCal is very much like that, you know, like Sacramento is like the city of trees, right? Like as soon as you go 30 minutes, an hour past Sacramento, it's like trees everywhere, you know, millions and millions of trees. So, I mean, that ecosystem, uh, you know, is definitely going to influence the growing of those agaves. Like, for instance, I'm dry farming here, and a lot of the agaves I'm trying out, uh, you know, they might suffer a little bit in their younger years, or certain species that I'm trying out, um, because the desert is very cruel climate, you know, like we have a lot of pests here that, for instance, they don't really see anything that's green or able to forage in the summer, and they might want to, you know, eat your plants because it's like this oasis in the middle of the desert. Whereas, like, you know, I have a lot of family that lives in NorCal and has like a bunch of agaves planted out like on hillsides, and I never see really any pressure like on their agaves, because deer and you know, other animals don't want to go for this agave when they have 4 foot tall beautiful green grass. And you know, so I think there are going to be a lot of similarities in that they can copy Oaxaca and Jalisco's dry farming style. Like, sadly, I'm seeing a lot of people trying to like irrigate their uh, you know, farms, like not trying at all to copy like the way of farming like agave from Oaxaca. So that's like a sad point in my view, because I've kind of, like, I wouldn't say mastered, but I've like done well with dry farming, say 6 or 7 species. So 6 or 7, I believe I could plan out from a 2 to 3 gallon plant in fall or winter, and basically by spring and summer they're established, and I never have to touch that plant again.
Oh
And
wow.
that's pretty much what's happening in Jalisco and Oaxaca. They don't have drip line and irrigation and sprinklers, and they don't have none of that. They're farming straight off of rain, and that's, I think, what is able to happen in like coastal and northern California that's not available to me as much, right? Like, a lot of the agaves are very tropical. You know, I'm farming a lot of desertic agaves, stuff that's, you know, U.S. natives from like the Arizona, California, you know, Nevada, and these agaves can kind of take the suffering more. But I give you an example. Tequiliana has been the worst performing agave for me, and that's the best performing agave for the majority of people that are farming in California right now. So it's like, I have the opposite, you could say, of what species are hitting for me versus what are hitting for them. And I find that kind of funny, because it's like, yeah, like in Northern California, like a lot of people are, you know, I don't want to take offense to any of them or bring offense to any of them, but it's like they're like, in my opinion, like not trying to differentiate themselves too much. They're trying to like basically make a mezcal or a tequila version in California, like the regional denomination. They can't call it that, but they want to use the same practices, the same agave, and that kind of is like really boring to me, to be honest, because it's like, if the whole point of growing agave in a different nation or a different area is to try something new and different. So, you know, if I had access to forest, you know, in Northern California, I'd be growing a bunch of agaves that are like nobody even has touched, that are very, very tropical. You know, I wouldn't be trying to copy like Oaxaca or Jalisco or any of those places. Like I give you, you know, an example like agave, you know, Muxi or Montana. These are got really large agaves that are in Mexico that are in more like wet areas, and nobody farms them for spirits, but they can be made into spirits. Like I guarantee it. And there's some of the more rare agaves, and even in Mexico, nobody's trying to farm them, right? Because they're used to what they're doing already. But if I had a more tropical climate or a more wet climate, I would be trying a lot of those agaves that need more water, you know. Yeah,
So
because you could dry farm them. So.
so to backpedal a little bit, I'm a part of this Facebook Mezcal group where all we do is just share pictures of our Mezcal adventures or Mezcal
Yeah,
bottles. But when I shared this flyer, there was some debate going on. Like, oh,
yeah,
that's not Mezcal. That's, so
yeah.
Mustachio here had an amazing comment or a question. What's the best alternative name to Mezcal if it's produced in the United States?
Yeah, I mean that's a funny one. I mean, I talked with people that it should be called like something simple and short, you know, because it's like mezcal and tequila are very like simple and short, you know. It's like California agave spirits, just it doesn't roll off the tongue, and it just doesn't sound good. Like, I mean, what mezcal is a Oaxacan agave spirit, but they don't call it Oaxaca agave spirit, you know? So it's like, um, I, I've thought about that a lot, and I would say, like, you know, the only thing that I've come up with is a word like Tecali. You know, it's like te de Cali, and I it was funny because I tried to trademark that name, and I think that somebody had trademarked it already, and then like that trademark lapsed. So now I'm thinking about it. I might have to.
Change it up.
But yeah, but it's funny I mention it because that guy, the trademark was alcoholic beverage.
Mm.
You know, like you when you file a trademark, you can see what they're filing the trademark for. So I'm not the first one that thought about that, right? Like the guy basically combined tequila word with California, Tecali, you know. But I think that would have to be a decision that's like, say there was at one point like 2 or 3 thousand agave farmers in California, and you know, there was like a meeting between all of them, and they're like over, you know, 60 or 70% were like, hey, we want to name it this. That would be cool, because right now it's like the California agave spirit thing, kind of like, you know, there's an organization, I forget the name of it, but that's kind of like, you know, putting their um, or you could say fighting for the distillers, the growers, the farmers, and I think that that's cool, but they need to maybe do more work in terms of kind of like seeing where this is gonna um, be called, like, you know, because I don't think California agave spirits kind of satisfies what people are going to be looking for, you know, because even the Venezuela thing, you know, they just call it cucuy. It's like, it just sounds dope, you know. We got to come up with something cool like that, you know. But I think it has to be a democratic kind of process. I don't think that I could, you know, say what it would be. Yeah, that's a tough one.
Well, we're definitely calling it a beautiful liquid right now.
Yeah, yeah,
But
it's
moving
chill.
away, moving away from the liquid and coming back to the farming aspect, you mentioned briefly that the entire agave is used. Some farmers in Oaxaca reuse the bagazo.
Yeah.
Some people use pulque for a very, very long time. So, can you tell us some sustainable farming practices that you implement in your farm?
Um, well, I mean, I run my farm like, I try to make it like as sustainable as possible, like overall. You know what I mean? Like I try to dry farm, so I'm not, you know, utilizing like a giant well to irrigate everything. Everything that grows here pretty much is growing off of rain, and then when it rains, I'm collecting the rainwater, and when it's not raining, I'm using that to irrigate. So if I run out of rainwater, that's it. You know what I mean? Like they're gonna suffer. Yeah, but most of the time, obviously, you know, I plant them in the right season and they do well. So from a water aspect, you know, I'm not putting any pressure on aquifers. I'm not putting pressure on surface water, and that's a big thing in California right now, because, you know, cities and farmers, and the environment are all kind of vying for the water that's available in California, and you know, it's going to be tough for new farms to open up and develop now that groundwater is starting to get regulated, you know.
Wow.
So now you have to put a meter on your well. So now we're trying to regulate the aquifers, which is good in my opinion in California. um, but yeah, from a soil perspective, I try to not till the soil. I don't use any pesticides, insecticides, herbicides. Like, I'm chemical free here. I don't use anything like that. Any fertilizers that are going onto the plants are going to be from the emu, the chickens, the geese, the codorniz, what do they call it in English? The quail. Um, and the goats are the main source of fertilizer because they're going throughout the whole farm and fertilizing everything. Um, and then obviously the dogs as well. Like, I try to feed my dogs a pretty raw diet, so their poop actually disintegrates. You know, if you give it just kibble, that poop is like not natural. It doesn't really fit inside of the farm ecosystem. So then I try not to bother the soil much, because I am in the desert. I apply a lot of mulch that, you know, I told you I have a division in my company that does landscaping and gardening. So everything that we collect throughout the week, is brought to the farm instead of taken to the dump. So that's an economic and an environmental thing, because one, from a profitable perspective, I'm not spending money at the dump, but two, like, the dump can, not take my green waste, and then it lasts longer. So all these dumps have finite timelines, and the dump closest to where my landscaping company is in Altadena has, I think, a 15-year time frame that it's going to close within. So, the less stuff that goes there, the better. And all that green waste comes to the farm. The goats or the birds or, any of the animals eat it, and then that stays as mulch within the rows of agave and cacti. And then, I'm not using any machinery really here. So a lot of tractors are used on agave and cactus farms. And my main workers here are the goats. So, from the beginning of a field, the clearing of that field, it's going to be done with goats. I'm going to plant out the agave or the cacti, and then let all the native stuff grow back. And then essentially the goats now are going within the rows and maintaining the whole farm. So before, like now I run my farm pretty sustainably, but the first time around, because I've already had like a harvest of agave, which was a year and a half ago. And the first time around, I irrigated a lot. I used at times 10-man weed whacker crews to go within the rows. And what will you do on vineyards, like with weed whackers, take everything out and let it go back into the soil. A lot of vineyards use bobcats or tractors to crimp or cut everything and put it back into the soil, which is pretty good too. But I don't like machinery because you have compaction on your soil. So the soil is like the most important thing to me on the farm, so I'm really trying to like not have machinery for the compaction, because I don't want to have my soil losing air pockets and losing this this kind of like, I don't want the ecosystem of the soil to get hurt essentially by the machinery, which I've observed on a lot of farms that I worked with, because there's no use in applying a lot of fertilizers or even things that might be benefiting the plants. If your soil is so compacted, it's not going to be able to absorb anything, because plants in themselves don't really absorb the nutrients. They have to work with the soil microbiome and ecosystem to exchange sugars for a lot of the nutrients that are in the soil. So it's like a relationship, and essentially if you have poor soil, by having less bacteria and having less all these things that are in the soil naturally, like the fungi, you're gonna have less yield in your plant, and it's just gonna perform less. And I try to also approach farming from an agroforestry perspective. So the goats I mentioned are my main workers, but I grow a lot of trees. Like I'm looking outside my window right now, the Palo Verdes, and of 3 different types, the Arizona, and the Mexican Palo Verdes, and blue eucalyptus, and mulberries, and pomegranates, and all these things that can be kind of like dry farmed and living off of a little bit of rainwater, and I try to plant them pretty large so that they can kind of catch on after a good rainy season, much like the agave and cacti. And all those trees are for allowing a little shade to go onto the agave, and then they're also providing forage and food for the goats. And in themselves, they're going to produce like fruit or seeds or something of substance, so that I can, sell that at a farmer's market or wholesale eventually as well. So overall, like, sustainability is like the name of the game, in my opinion, because, it reduces your farm cost as a farmer. I feel it kind of good, but ironic at the same time, that a lot of the reason why farmers that I'm working with and farmers in general are approaching like permaculture and regenerative farming is because it's profitable. It's not because they just, out of the kindness of their heart, decided to be environmental one day. If you're able to have better soils and better ecosystem for your farm, you're wasting you know, sometimes I've saved, no joke, farmers 500,000 in their fertilizer costs
Wow.
and made them $1 million by just integrating, you know, livestock into their farm.
Nice.
So it's like, instead of having a huge cost, you might integrate something else into the farm and turn that cost into now profit, right? So a lot of these regenerative systems are popping out because they're profitable, not because, you know, it just, like, as much as it sounds good, people are really adopting these systems because they're profitable. And especially fertilizer in the past few years, nitrogen fertilizer specifically, many places doubled, many places quadrupled. So a lot of people started saying, hey, it's not profitable for us to keep running the farm in this way. Let's try to adopt different, you know, permaculture or regenerative systems to essentially, in many cases, save the farm. In other cases, just be more profitable. You know, yeah. Well, that's at least my opinion. I'm sure some people are doing it from the good of their heart. That's how it started out for me. But then I realized it was more profitable, and I doubled down as much as I could. You know, and I think that's what's happening a lot too. Yeah.
Sweet. We got a question from K Constructo. I guess it's a two-part question from K Constructo. He said,
What'd
"Can
you
you
say?
dig a well? And
Yeah.
also, are there any laws against collecting rainwater?"
Yeah. Both those are great questions. So here you can drill a well. A lot of the farms in the area are commercial alfalfa farms and commercial vegetable farms, and they have wells that are about, you know, anywhere from 200 to 500 feet deep. Some of the mega farms that I've worked, I think like I worked for a mega farm out here that was like 6 or 7 thousand acres, and I think their well was like over 1,000 feet. So I mean, there's abundant rainwater, or there's an abundant aquifer here under the Antelope Valley, and there's very few farmers that are tapping into that. And now that groundwater is being regulated, you know, they really aren't going to be able to abuse that, for instance, as it was in the Central Valley, just a little bit northwest of us, where they've lost in some cities 60 whole feet because of subsidence and pumping that aquifer so much, you know. Here we haven't had aquifer pressure as much, but as I just mentioned, most of the farms are veggies and alfalfa. And in the middle of the desert, I mean, these guys are running sprinklers almost all day, you know, in the summer right now. And they're wasting millions of gallons of water. You know, they measure their water in acre feet, not gallons, you know, like an insane amount of water. And I think the future of farming here, at least in this region, is going to be more kind of what I'm doing: cactus, agave, dates, you know, trees that are desertic, or plants that are desertic, or livestock that could be ran desertic in a desertic ecosystem, you know, because they're not going to allow you to abuse the aquifer as you could before, unregulated. So you can put a well here. I've costed out the well from various companies, and you know, it could go anywhere from 30 to 60,000. And if I needed the well, it's not such a huge cost, you know. But I think I've been running now 7 or 8 years without a well. So
Wow.
you know, I've essentially proven you could have a profitable small farm without a well, and just dry farm even in the middle of the desert, right? Even if it was limited to just agave and cacti. Now I've integrated a lot of animals and different stuff. But you know, my system and a lot of other people that I work with, their systems could be scaled to thousands of acres. It just is really a lifestyle thing, you know. Like, I run this whole farm by myself and with my dad helping me at times. And, you know, it doesn't really require much people for us to generate what we want to live a good lifestyle. I could scale this to 1,000 acres, and I actually own the land to do it, but I don't feel right doing it right now. And a lot of that land I do want to keep wild. And, you know, I just, I think a well will come eventually. I think within a year or two, I probably will put a well, but it's because I want to build a house out here. So I want just, you know, consistent water for the house. And as my herd grows, obviously I won't be able to dry farm the herd, you know. So I will need a well for animals, but running a well for animals is not pumping very much water, you know. I might be, even if I was 1,000 acre farm with, you know, tens of thousands of goats here, I would probably be at 1% of what an alfalfa farm is pumping out here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my goal is to never abuse that well, you know, once I do put it, um, and mainly go towards rainwater. And you know, his second question was, aren't there laws against collecting rainwater? In California and over 40 states, there's no laws against collecting rainwater. That's a very that's like almost a myth. You know, everybody says it like, oh, it's illegal to collect rainwater, because in a lot of states, huge corporations. You know, I'm a historian, so in the history, a lot of huge farms were very greedy and started building dams and started building ways of just absorbing a lot of the surface water and rainwater that was coming, and it started affecting ecosystems, rivers, and cities. So that's why a lot of those laws existed. But recently, in the 90s and 2000s, they took a lot of those out. In California's case, during the drought, I think 2011, when it first hit big, they took out that law. So now you could collect rainwater, you know, in California, no problem. There are like some stipulations on like commercial use of it. So like I think, you know, like if you're like just put a bunch of roofs to, you know, your whole land and try to capture rainwater, they might tell you something like I think, I don't remember the exact wording, but it's like you can't like try to like abuse it in a way commercially. So in my case, I could collect as much rainwater as I want, and there's no issues. Um, every year, I probably collect around. I have 7 roofs, and I collect probably around 12 to 15,000 gallons, and I run the whole farm off 12 to 15,000 gallons. To put that in perspective, and I told you I have a lot of animals, so I might order water truck 1 or 2 times a year in the summer, like right now. So let's put it at 20 to 25,000 gallons. To put that in perspective, every time you take a shower, a 5-minute shower, you're using around 300 gallons. So in the time, I run my whole farm on less water that you use taking a shower within 2 to 3 months. You know, to just put it in perspective. And I know farms that are just like I've worked for a lot of alfalfa farms and different farms in the area, and they're just using, like I told you, they measure in acre feet because they're using millions of gallons of rainwater. So or of just water from aquifer or surface water that might come from the California aqueduct. So when you're comparing that system, it's almost negligible compared to a regular farm. And I plan to scale that out, like as a lot of I want to build more roofs to try to capture more rainwater, because I've noticed that I could basically run the farm on very little rainwater. So I didn't think about that before, but now that it's almost like a challenge to me, like of being like, how many years can I go without the well? So like I know that rainwater is gonna like push that further and further. And like I said, I'm comfortable now without the well. As I grow, I know that I probably will need the well unless I put a lot of roofs. But that is going to be all part of my process, trying not to use the aquifer as much. So capturing rainwater and making sure that all the rain stays in the soil is going to be big. And that comes back to the sustainability, because before I started like thinking about my farm regeneratively or in a permaculture way, I would measure the soil and I would have to I couldn't measure any water 6 feet down. And once I started keeping the native grasses, shrubs, and planting not a monoculture, like before I would just put rows of agave or rows of cacti. Now I plant some agave, some cacti, some trees, and I run the native plants in there, together with what I'm farming. So that now has allowed in the summer the water table to be at 4 feet of what the roots can hit. If it gets the monsoons like right now, then it could go up to 2 feet. And during the fall and winter, it's at 1 feet. So really a 1 gallon plant in a tall container can have a 1 feet of roots. So when you're really thinking about it, that's about the size, 1-2 gal that I need to put in the ground before it can naturally start absorbing the water that's in the soil. But I didn't have that water in the soil before I started doing good practices cactuses, like, and that's why I think I had to irrigate a lot, because I wasn't able to keep the water in the soil. So now, as I'm collecting more rainwater, I need less of it, actually, because I've figured out how to keep more of what hits the soil in the soil, yeah.
This is fascinating. We're not just learning about the importance of agaves, the differences of mezcal from Mexico to California, but also the water that has to
Yeah, the
do
water is
with
huge.
growing the
Yeah.
agave. Changing gears here. Uh,
Somebody had a question, I think.
yeah, yeah. Changing
Mr.
gears.
Tequila.
We've got Mr. Tequila Facts asking. Sorry he joined
No.
late. And then have you talked about home stills becoming legal or unregulated?
Yeah, I mean, I posted a video about it, but we haven't talked about it. So like this month, the I'd been following this court case for like 6 months because it's super exciting. Because I consider myself a hobby distiller. I'm not doing it for any profit right now. It's mostly like experimentation with the intention of making it a commercial business one day, right?
And and
Um,
for the viewers that might not know what a home still is, do you mind doing a brief definition of that?
Well, sure. So, I mean, a lot of the stills that people are going to be using for making spirits, I mean, like, at least in Jalisco, most of them that I've seen are 100 to 1,000 liter stills, So they're producing, if you're thinking about a 500 milliliter bottle, anywhere from 200 to 2,000 bottles in just one go, you know? A hobby distiller might have I've seen little baby stills, sometimes 5 liters. I have two small stills that I've used for making a bunch of different stuff, like even essential oils and shit. Like they're useful for a lot of stuff, but the ones that I have are a 20 liter and a 50 liter. So like, max 40 bottles, 80 bottles, and very, very small. That's what I consider a hobby distiller. If you're making less than 100 bottles a run, pretty much a hobby distiller, in my opinion. I mean, maybe other people are making money at 100 bottles a run, but I fucking doubt it, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Like, because when you look at all the overhead and how much land cost and how much labor and all this, I mean, at 100 bottles, it's really, you're doing it for fun. Like, and I know a lot of mezcaleros, they might have like, oh, we made this run of 100 bottles, 500 bottles, like, and they bring it all the way to the US, and I'm like, I mean, that must be really difficult if that's like your first thing. Sure, they might have distributors that they're already working with, and they could just like put it in the system, like, let's go. But if you're starting out, that would you're probably not going to be profitable doing that. To be honest, yeah. But to answer his question, I think or we hadn't talked about it. Now they legalized hobby distilling, so I had been following this court case for 6 months, and essentially, the Hobby Distillers Association of America, which is like this trade organization that I donated money to, and they basically fight kind of like the double NACP. They're like trying to like fight for little distillers in their house, because up until like this month, you could make beer at home, you could make wine at home, but you couldn't make spirits. Like, just possessing a still was 5 years if they caught you with
Wow.
spirits. If you try to sell spirits, if you try to do basically just owning the liquor, mad jail. You know what I
Woo.
mean? That's why nobody talked about it. Like I heard a lot of people now this month have been posting videos on distilling and stuff, and it's still up in the air. I wouldn't be going that far, to be honest with you. Like they basically won their court case, the Hobby Distillers Association, and they gave the government 14 days to put a still on it, and they didn't do it. So according to the court case, now hobby distilling is legal because the government hasn't put any hold on it or challenged it, right? So they probably will challenge it at some point, but there's this small point right now where it's legal. But say in 6 months they decide, oh, now we're going to actually pass this regulation on it, because the people that they beat was the TTB. So the TTB regulates alcohol in America, and they could come in 6 months and say, yeah, that's cool, you brought out this court case, this is the way we interpret it, and now we maybe won't put you in jail, but it's still illegal in ABC or D way. So I wouldn't like be posting hobby distilling how I'm seeing a lot of people doing on Instagram, because it's semi-legal now. It's like in this gray area, but then in 6 months it might not be, and you have all these videos of you doing felonies, which is probably not smart. But a lot of people do it. You know what I mean? Like I know people in their apartments hobby distilling, and not agave. I mean, I know people just go into the store, they buy fruit, and they make their own spirits, and it actually tastes great. Like the the art of distilling is a passion. You know what I mean? So a lot of people are just like, I want to see what I could do. And from a farming perspective, that's almost like how I do it. I've distilled probably now, over like 25 to 30 agaves.
Oh,
So, I've done some agaves, only like 4 or 5 of them, and made a couple of bottles, but it's like that, that's not profitable at all. That's like for fun, experimentation. What I do is keep a huge Excel and notebook of data. So I keep the temperature of everything that's going into distillation, what I ferment at, what I use to break it up, and doing all that. I'm making like this huge database so that one day when I am actually able to make a brand and do something with it, you can have all this data to bank off of, and I learned that from a lot of wineries because they're using data huge now to like even predict like a lot of their decision making. And I think that's going to come to farms, and why not do it in agave too, right? So I think if you have data on a lot of agave, of how they grew, how, with the water that went into them, your style of growing them, what soil they were growing in, what animals you ran with, and what plants grew next to them, all this data is going to be able to tell you and make better decision making for when you actually are a distiller. Because say you get X, Y, and Z flavors on a spirit that you distill, and you want to recreate that, then now you have this database to tell you exactly how to do that from the seed all the way to the actual distilling.
mm.
So I try to take it more from an experimental view. I kind of just want to see how much variation of good things that I can make, but can't sell it. And even if I could, it wouldn't be, in my opinion, profitable. So it's kind of just like, you know, like if you were a small farm like me and you were trying to make your own brand, the way to do it legally would be to go to a distiller, use your agave, and create your brand under the distillery. The reason I don't do that is because I sell plants. So because I don't have to profit at the end of my agave's life, exactly. I might sell plants anywhere from seed all the way up to I've sold a 5 or 6 foot of agave for $400 or $500. So it's like if I can profit during the lifetime of the agave, I'm gonna sell the agave. Well, not always, but put it this way: if you're gonna get X amount at the end of the lifetime of that agave, like say a distiller is telling you, I'm gonna give you $2 to $3 a kilo or a pound for your agave, right? And they're not gonna vary on species too much, right? But say they tell you, okay, we're gonna give you $2 to $3 a pound for your agave, and say you got a 100-pound agave calculated, estimated. So you're like, okay, at the end of this agave's lifetime, I might get $200 to $300. If in year 2 or 3 I can sell that agave for $200 or $300, why would I even wait to the end of maturity, right?
Right.
So I grow enough agave to sell whatever I need to in plants, make my farm, not be extremely profitable, but pay the bills, keep the lights on, and continue experimenting and growing a lot of agave, because eventually I'll have more agave that I can experiment and I know what to do with, so then it'll be like I'll be doing some stuff, I'll give some stuff to some of my boys that are distillers, and then I might send some to Mexico. We'll be figuring out what to do with that, because there's a lot of stuff that I want to do in the future, but I just don't have the agave today for it, right? I try to do my experiments before other people's. So a lot of people ask for my agave, and I tell them I'd rather distill it myself, and even if it comes out shit, at least I learn, rather than you do that. And I'm sure you'll make a great spirit, but I'd rather have that knowledge myself because I don't possess it at this time. So yeah.
And you're touching on a lot of great points By the way, everybody who's watching, thanks for watching. Be sure to drop a question in the comments. We're here to answer some of your questions, so don't be shy. But we're here in California, and you're starting to talk about the business aspect.
Yeah.
Most of the mezcal that's made in Mexico um, is the leader. So, how do you see California
Well,
evolving
Jalisco
in,
is
in
like the.
spirits?
What do you mean by leader? Like they make more money?
Yeah, like they produce the most mezcal that they
Oh,
export.
totally. Yeah.
Yeah, so how would you compare the
Well,
growth of California versus Mexico?
well, Oaxaca makes like $700 million in revenue from mezcal. Sales in the U.S. every year, as of last year, I guess, and tequila sales is like a couple billion.
Mm,
So we're nothing. I mean, like, there's a few brands that are selling spirits, California agave spirits, and I mean, I don't know if they've sold even 1,000 or 10,000 bottles yet. What they do have is an amazing freaking spirit. What
mm,
they need are people to get behind them and show other people of these spirits. You know what I mean? So, like, I mean, the two that I really like right now are Jano spirits and Don Manny agave spirits. And one's made in a mezcal fashion, kind of like Jano, and one's made in a kind of tequila fashion, which is kind of like Don Manny. And I think what they don't have is just people that are on their side, kind of like fighting for them, like distributors and other people. So I don't know if we're even uh, like we're negligible compared to mezcal and tequila.
mm.
Put it that way. It's like we're not even on the radar. That's why I laugh when people say like that we're providing competition to mezcal or tequila because it's almost like I don't want to say we're a joke as California, but it's like we're very innovative, but with innovation sometimes you don't get speed. And what these places have is speed. Like I'm seeing a lot of forests being cut down. Not personally, but I talk to people in Jalisco and Oaxaca, and they tell me like, dude, look at this hillside right here. They're planting agave. They tear everything down and plant agave, and in both states. And you know that that's unfortunate. But that just shows you the speed of it, right? Like they're doing these things sometimes within weeks, where they clear a whole hillside and by the next week they have a planet of agave. So um,
That's
that
crazy.
that I don't think is going to happen in California. We are slow for reasons. Like I've worked with a lot of vineyards in Napa, and man, the number one thing they complain to me about is regulation and red tape of the Napa government. Like I had a vineyard that they wanted to plant out a hillside 15 years ago. They would have just planted out the hillside. Today, they have to submit an environmental review to the Napa government. They have to tell them exactly what they're going to plant, how they're not going to have erosion, how they're going to prevent the fertilizers that they apply from going into nearby streams. All great stuff. Amazing. That's what the fuck they should actually have for people that are planting stuff, right? But it just has created so much slowness, you could say, in what gets planted. So it's like here, people really think about what they're gonna put, and the agave farmers here are no different. They're really thinking about like, okay, how can we approach this agave farming in California sustainably? And that might, in my opinion, take before you see a big brand coming out of California, I think it might be 10 to 20 years. And that, people laugh because they're like, well, we're going to be not even thinking about this by then. And that's the point. Like, it took a long time to create mezcal and tequila. And I don't think California will rival anything uh, near those numbers soon at all, some of the biggest farmers that, I've seen here, they have hundreds of acres of agave. You know, um, to put it in perspective, that's still very small farm compared to farms that are in Oaxaca or Jalisco. And it will take 10 years before, those farms are able to create nurseries, greenhouses, and distribute all this agave everywhere. So today, a lot of the agave farmers, if they're smart, they're going to become, it's like gold mining in Sacramento, in the history. It's like the richest people weren't the guys mining the gold, it was the people selling the shovels.
Right.
And the other farmers today, they're not going to get rich farming agave. they might get rich selling agave to other people who are going to farm agave. And that's kind of ironic that their own clientele is their own industry. But that is something that I think is that's just how it's going to be for a while, because like there's not a thousand farmers that are relatively or readily today saying, hey, let's get into agave and start farming agave. It's very experimental thing. And the gold mining example is very useful here, because it's like a lot of people think they're going to get rich farming agave. Show me one rich agave farmer in Mexico. Like I could probably name them on one hand or two hands. And the majority of them are vertically integrated companies that also distill. They're not just farmers. Because what happens is this: like, if you're just a farmer, prices are great, you do great. Prices are bad, you might go out of business. If you're just a distiller, when the agave is highly priced, you might not even be able to make your spirit at a profitable rate. You might not be able to put stuff into barrels. Now, if it's a low price, you might make a lot of money with your spirits. So you see how within the fluctuation, that could decide the fate of your business. Whereas the vertically integrated companies, from seed to bottle, these guys aren't worrying about that, because they control the price of agave, and they're not worrying about, oh, what's the price going to be? What am I going to buy it at? What am I going to sell it at? They don't care. They know from the moment they planted, it's going to cost me this much to get it to maturity, and from maturity, it's going to cost me this much to distill it. Like if they're smart, they're doing that from day one and trying to at least estimate that, like, in a business plan or some form, because if they're not, then they're going to get caught with their pants down, because they're going to try to sell year 6 or 7 and find out that prices are unsustainable for the business. And that's what happens to a lot of farmers in Mexico, and they go out of business. So sadly, I think that will happen to the majority of farms here in California. I always tell people, I'm an entrepreneur. I've done a lot of different businesses, and by year 5 in America, 50% of businesses go out of business that started with you on year 1. By year 7, that's like 65%. So let's put it in perspective. If you're an agave farmer and you're trying to make your profits off of that year 5 to 7 or whenever that's mature, most businesses aren't even in business by the time that you're trying to figure out the market and trying to, let me see what I'm gonna do with this agave and all that. So that's why I tell people from day 1, you better be thinking where the hell that agave is going that you're putting in the ground. If not, it's dangerous. Like, you might get screwed. And a lot of the people that aren't thinking like that, I'm telling you, they're the sellers, because they're going to be people that are putting agave into the market. Let me turn on the light real quick because it's getting kind of dark here. But
Steve has been dropping some gems, some wake-up calls on us, a lot of reality checks, but it's also an amazing thing to be involved in Mezcal. And hey,
yeah,
Steve, how you doing? We're back.
to get some water. No, yeah, it's
Yeah, you've been dropping a lot of fantastic gems, but how about we get to know you just a little bit as we're winding down? What would you say is like one of the most memorable experiences you've ever had as an agave farmer?
Memorable. I think just like maybe working with like other farms that are like getting started, like a lot of people, like what you were just saying, like, trying to help on the business side. It's like, I don't really see other agave farmers as my competition, because it's like a very tough business to even sustain yourself in. So it's like, if you're in this in 5 years from now, I mean, you've pretty much earned my respect. I don't need to like compete with you. The market will, and will decide if you make it. And teaching a lot of these small guys, like, those tips that I've messed up on, like, the number one tip that I tell people is like, don't bulldoze your land. Like, I destroyed a few sections of my land that I had to restore by doing that. And those little tips and tricks are what I try to help a lot of people with. A lot of people come to me for like, how do I start seeds, or how do I start, growing agave, or how do I start growing, cacti. And get into goats, and you know, I try to just help as much people as I can, because I think that, you know, we need a lot more farmers. Like, every farmer that I work for is like in their 50s or 60s, and it's rare to see a person in their 20s or 30s or 40s farming. Um, and it's becoming more so because of the cost of land, and, you know, people aren't able to have access to become a farmer. So a lot of people want to be farmers, and if I can do anything to help them, then I'm going to try to, you know. Obviously I work, you know, a bunch, so it's tough for me to reply to everybody, but, you know, I'll try to, uh, you know, help them as much as I can. And I'm sure a lot of people rag on me for just like being very like talkative sometimes in what, you know, direct messaging with them. But it's like, I'm not a person that's about small talk. Like, if I talk with you, if I'm taking time out of my day to talk with you, like, I'm gonna fucking talk with you about some important shit. You know, I'm not gonna like talk to you about what's the weather, or did you see this sport game, you know, like. And then, you know, sometimes like I try to like overshare the information with people about agave or cacti, because I don't want them to go through like the problems that I see with a lot of the farmers in Mexico, or a lot of the farmers that might be starting up here, you know. So I tell them, you know, as much as you uh, can, like, I tell other farmers, like, try to work with other people in your industry. So it's like, you know, California, what it does has is very collaborative, like, farmers that are working with each other and trying to figure out like how they can essentially learn and go faster, right? So like, I'm not greedy with like the info that I've learned here. I tell people I'm growing, you know, all these different species. This is what I've used. This is what I think, you know, like, I want to do in the future, what you should do or experiment a little bit with. And I give people challenges all the time, like, try to do this or that. And that's going to be sharing all that info, how we all progress quicker. You know what I mean? Because in Mexico, at least from the small agave farmers and cactus farmers, what you see is a lot of that. You see them holding meetings together, or talking with each other very often, and saying like, you know, like, how did you do this distill? How did you grow this plant? And, you know, I got this disease. What did you do? And that's how they've progressed to make such an amazing spirit, you know, like, that is something that, you know, is uh, always going to be needed in California. You know, like, California, obviously it's America, so people are very money orientated, and like sometimes greedy in business, trying to share information, or like, you know, oh, I don't want to tell you what I'm growing, or what I'm gonna use this for, or who I'm selling to, or any of that stuff. But it's like, I always think about it like, you know, competition is just yourself, because at the end of the day, if like, I'll give you an example. Say you farmed agave, right? And we looked at each other competitively, where we never interact, right? Well, what's the opposite? We interact, right? Well, say I get a contract for shipping, just off the top of my head. Say, you know, some random dude from Dubai is like, Steve, I need 100,000 agave. I maybe only have 10, you know, in my greenhouses. And then I know you that got 90 over there. But I can't even make the deal without your 90. Now, if you look at people as competition, you lose out on those deals, because you're going to make money, I'm going to make money, and I make money off the top of that deal. So at the end of the day, when you look at people as collaborators, you're going to make way more money in business than looking at them as competition. And it's sad sometimes to see that from a lot of people, because, like I tell you, I try to interact with anybody who's farming agave or cactus, or, you know, working with goats, and I'll ask a lot of questions to a lot of people, and you could tell, you know, like, a lot about people, because they won't respond at all to a significant question to ask about their business, you know. Whereas somebody asks me like super simple question about like goats, and I might text them like 2-3 paragraph essay on that question. You know what I mean? So that is going to be, I think, maybe what lacks in a lot of places here in America. But among the small farmers, what I see is positive stuff right now. So maybe not, but, you know, if I just had to like predict, because there will be big brands here too. You know, I tell people, if you fear what big tequila and big mezcal are doing in Mexico, that's nothing compared to what big ag will do in America. Big ag in America is the big bad boy, and they do stuff sometimes for efficiencies is really sketchy. So I'm sure we'll have a lot of that too. But Mexico has that too. They have Casamigos and really crappy stuff too. So, and it's their best-selling stuff. So I don't think that will be unique to anywhere. That's going to be how the markets separated always. And yeah, that's the market will decide. I think I don't think people need to be as greedy sometimes, even in Mexico. But because sometimes people in Mexico like are really like hateful towards like what people in California are doing, and I'm like, dude, like we're not even competing with you. Like we're in not in like a mean way, but we're in our own league. Like we could look to you for advice, but that's about it, because the business plan of what tequila or mezcal is in Mexico doesn't even work here. Like for instance, like the labor in Mexico is like 150 200 pesos a day, which is like $10. So like they're able to produce these spirits very cost efficiently because of labor in Mexico, lack of, in a lot of places, environmental regulations, water regulations. Not to hate on them at all, like they produce amazing stuff, but I'm just saying, like, it's easier to do this in Mexico, and for sure very much more cheaper. And we're not going to be competing on price, I think, like at least not for a decade or two, where we have as many agave as Mexico might have. At the beginning, I think you're going to see a lot of really high-priced California agave spirits that are going to be a niche, that is going to be sold mostly in California. I don't think that is going to be shipped to Mexico much or other places, just because of cost. And like I said, the economics of a Oaxacan or a Jaliscan agave farm or distiller, we can learn a lot from them. But the business side is not very applicable at all. It's completely different in America. And those are the things people are going to have to figure out here. And we are figuring it out. Like, people are wasting a lot of money to figure that out. So we're well on our way. Yeah.
And this user here watching is also trying to figure it out. His name is a fellow Anon. Asked, I live in a seasonal floodplain in southern Arizona. The soil is loomy clay, and water gets to be about a foot running across the property. Could planting cactus and agave on mounds be a viable option?
Yeah. I mean, definitely, especially at the lower points of where that water is trickling to. Like, you could try to form rows with the cacti and agave in a form, like, say, it's going the water from north to south. Then you could try to form rows going from north to south to essentially slow down that water and allow it to percolate into the soil better. And the cacti and agave will definitely help with capturing that water. What I would try to do is just, when you plant them in rows, try to create anywhere from a 6 to 1 inch, or a 6 inch to 1 foot kind of like beam. So he's talking about mounds, but if you make the whole row be just 6 inches above what's right in front of it, the water is going to slow down and go into the roots of those cacti and agave. And then if anything goes past that, first couple rows, the more rows you put, it's going to be slowing the water down more and more. So I have zero runoff on my farm because of all the plants that I have. And that's, what you could do. And then you're going to be able to get something out of that piece of land, even though, you're just running it off of rain. I would try to experiment with a few trees there too, that are anything that produces something edible, like, a palo verde. You could plant it, during the rainy season as a 15-gallon, and it'll do the same thing as the cacti and agave. But what it will do is produce edible seed pods for you, or, something like a mulberry tree that produces edible fruit. The agave, obviously, you can make into spirits, and the cacti will produce edible pads and fruit for you. Edible cacti fencing, is something that's been used throughout California's history, all the way back to the wineries that were formed by the Spanish and the Mexicans. So, you could have a cacti that's an opuntia um, there's many of them that are tree cacti. So then you could even, have a big wall essentially, like over time, like form from those agave and cacti, depending how compact you place them. But yeah, I definitely would plant that in Arizona. Um, you know, the agaves probably do well for you, or like Americana, Utahensis, anything from Arizona, obviously that's native to your state. I have some parviflora here that's native to Arizona, and I think 3 or 4 different Arizonan agaves. So they do amazing here. I mean, in your native state, they're going to do better than here, and live off of just rainwater. So there's about 4 or 5 agaves that are native to Arizona that probably will live with no work from you if you just plant it where that water is running. And the same with cacti. There's a lot of cacti that are native to Arizona. So I got a lot of fruit and cacti that are native here too. So that sounds like a good ass plan.
And you've got a lot of love coming in from Agave Americano saying you're super knowledgeable, you're super grateful, and we're super grateful. Thanks so much for jumping on and
Yeah, dude.
taking a lot of time from your day to educate us, not just on agave, California spirits, mezcal, and farming, uh, but everything in between. And yeah, do you have any
Yeah.
closing thoughts for the viewers?
Not really. I mean, if you got any uh, like really good questions that you want to me to answer, or anything that I missed or something, but I'm good on my end. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Steve, for jumping on. We really, really appreciate you. I definitely learned a thing or two about a lot. So thank you so much, and we'll see you around. And
Yeah, man.
if you weren't able to send your comments in, be sure to send Steve a DM, and he'll be
Yeah,
happy to help.
totally.
Well,
All
have
right,
a
man.
great
Thank you.
night, Steve.
Yeah, you
Thank you so much.
too, man. Yeah.
See ya.
Nice talking to you. All right.
Cheers.
Cheers.